Won't you tell us, first of all, where your full name, where you were born? Pops, won't you tell us?
Ellis Franklin Touchton, born in Marietta, Florida, on July the 11th, 1916.
Mom?
And I'm Catherine Black Touchton. And I was born in Lowndes County out in the country to John and Ida Black, December 25th of 1917.
What different places have y'all lived?
See, we've lived, other than Jacksonville,
Well,
we've lived in Alma, Georgia, and where we're presently living, Lake Park, Georgia. Well, actually, Valdosta, isn't it?
nearer to Valdosta,
Yeah,
than the
Valdosta.
mail at Lake Park.
What's the number of brothers and sisters each one of you have?
I have 4 brothers and 3 sisters.
And I had 3 brothers and 4 sisters.
What's the earliest thing you can remember as a child? Your earliest remembrance? How old were you?
Never thought much about that.
One of the earliest things I remember as a child was climbing up on a chair. I knew Daddy had his straight razor up there, and I was climbing up on a chair to a chest of drawers to try to get that razor. I remember when Mama came in and caught me.
Remember about how old you were?
Probably about 2.
One of the earlier things I remember is Mama took some old broken bricks and built a little cookout frame around it, around an old frying pan, so that we could have little cookouts out in the yard. And I thought that's the most wonderful thing in the world. I must have been, 4 or 5.
What the first modern invention or modern convenience that you remember as being amazing?
I expect the automobile was. It was so new to us, we saw them occasionally, but to see how they worked and everything when they finally got no truck, between my uncle and my daddy putting their money together, they bought a truck for us to carry produce into town. And that was quite an experience to let us ride in the back of it and the wind blowing in our face.
I expect the car was for me too, because I remember going to town with Dad and Mama and Frank. We were the ones I recall earliest with a horse and buggy, and then finally Daddy was able to get a truck in his business, and so I expect that was the earliest thing I remember.
Do you remember your first pet and the name? You were little.
Our whole family pet was a dog named Joe, and what he got to eat was cornbread and whatever was left over at his table. If we didn't have enough left over to feed him of scraps, well, Mama would bake him a piece of cornbread.
I had a dog named Roxy, and we kept Roxy about 11 years, I guess. And she was mine because we drove cattle together as a child. One of my jobs was to get the cattle in for the milking, and Roxy and I were companions. She nipped the cattle on the heels to let them know it was time to go. And a very constant companion.
What was your first paying job you remember?
Handing tobacco to the next higher step was the one who twisted the tobacco into shape and put a piece of cord around it and put it on a long stick, so that they were able, and tied that into a knot so that they were able to carry it up into a high tobacco barn. Or they called it curing, which meant that they would put a fire into some rods and build a fire, and it would send smoke and heat up and cure the tobacco.
How old were you?
Oh, I was probably 10 or 11 or more before we even got tobacco.
What?
I had several little jobs over at Granddaddy Ellis's dairy. But the main one I had, and the one I remember the best, was when I was 13. I would get up in the morning and help deliver milk on a little retail route he had. And it started about 2 o'clock, get back home about 5, and sleep till 7, then go to school. I made $8 a week doing that. Gave Mama 5 because the family needed the money for groceries. Kept 3.
How much did you get paid for your?
I don't remember the very first ones, but when we began to go to neighbors' house also and hire out, as we called it, 50 cents
An hour?
a day.
Or a day?
Not an
50
hour.
cents a day.
And we got a good meal because the farmer's wife would cook a big meal that day for all the workers. So, and usually Daddy would go in, or Mr. Wilton, who was our next door neighbor, would go into town and get some ice so we could have some iced tea.
What was your favorite thing to do as a kid? You got to do whatever you wanted to do.
Mine was playing baseball. I loved to play baseball, and while we didn't have much to play with, and a cracked bat, a ball with tape around it, and maybe the catcher had a mitt, something, but hardly any equipment. But that was my favorite game. Favorite thing.
We'd usually, I'd walk a mile over to my double first cousin's house, or they'd walk the other way to ours, and just being together in any kind of game that we thought of. Make it gathering flowers or just anything to be together. We just love to be together.
How did y'all meet? How did y'all meet each other?
Well, I went to visit my cousin, who happened to be married to his uncle, and she had a sister that was about my age, so that was in Jacksonville, and I had a chance to go and visit them. And Uncle Ray said, after church today, we'll come home and eat our meal, and then let's go out to Hubs. That's what he called Ellis's daddy. And said there's a bunch of young people out there that love to sing, and I know Catherine does. So let's go. So that suited everybody. And when we got there, they were not even home. He said, let's go on in and get a drink of water and sit there a few minutes, because I've just got a feeling they'll be back in a little bit. And he walked in the door of his own home, and I was already sitting on the couch with the rest of them when we first saw each other.
How long did you date before you got married?
10 months.
Let's see, that was in the summertime, so
About 10 months.
yeah, almost a year before about 10 months was right.
So how old were each of you when you got married?
I was 22,
And I was 23,
almost 24.
almost 24, because I would have been 24 in July. It was May when we got married.
How did you come up with the name of each of your children? Starting with Paul.
Well, I wanted the Ellis part in there. I think we just picked a Bible name that we both liked and just mentioned Paul, and it went together pretty well, we thought, so that's where we got that. And then my daddy had passed away in just time we got married almost, and I kept such loving memories of him. When Ryan came along, I said, well, I'd like to name him, if it's all right with you, with one of your daddy's name and my daddy's name. So my daddy was named John Ryan, and we took the Ryan part from that, and his daddy was named Herbert. And so that was our second one's name. And on Oneida, we were pondering names, but a teacher that I had taught with, and I had talked over a lot of names, and I had heard one I never heard before. And I said, well, I know somebody who changed the A from Anita and named her child Odita, and I liked it. I might just kind of save that for one of my children. So when she came along, I mentioned that, and it was fine with him. So I don't remember about who put the joy. You may have put the joy
No,
in. I don't
no,
remember
I
about
think
the
so.
joy part. But anyway, we filled it with joy too.
Anyway, it was a good name, it suited her, that wasn't Joy, but she was certainly there.
And then Ellis's daddy walked into the hospital the day that Iris was born, and he said, well, I got a name for her. And I said, what's that? And he said, Iris. And I said, Iris what? And he said, just Iris. And she's never let us forget that we didn't give her another name. When she was a little bit older, we said, well, how about Sue? Or what would you like to be named? Maybe she said Sue. Anyway, we called her Iris Sue for a while, but of course she knows that never was on the paper. And then Mary, I had a sister who died in a fire, and previous to that, and I liked the name Mary anyway, and I asked him. He always just agreed with me on those things, so I got to
Never had any problem about the name.
Mary, Mary Louise, that was my sister's
That was her full name.
full name.
When and where did you become a Christian?
Well, if you want me to go first, I was going to a little place called Mount Pleasant that did not have a baptistry, and it was when I was 12. I was just about 12 years old, and I had a meeting there at this little place, and when I wanted to be baptized, they had been baptizing in a pool that was near to the church building, but it somebody's idea was, why don't we go into town? There were two other people who wanted to be baptized and use the baptistry of the one in town, Central Avenue Church of Christ. And so that's when it was, when I was almost 12.
I was, I guess I was 25 or such a matter. When we were married, of course I was a member of the Baptist church, but Catherine made me promise before we were married that we'd go on Sunday morning, so she would be there for communion, and we did, and I guess it was short after Paul was born, maybe 6 weeks or such a matter. Paul was born in February. We had a meeting at the old Willow Branch Church, and a preacher by the name of John O'Dowd from Waco, Texas, was our preacher, a very powerful speaker. And during the course of the meeting, we went. I guess we probably went every night. I don't remember now, but probably went every night. And I began to realize that what I had wasn't the truth. So it was during that meeting, I do not remember the date of it, but one Sunday we had dinner over at Archie Smith's house, and then they had prearranged it that he'd be there too, and I agreed to talk to him, so it wasn't that they forced me at all. And after dinner we talked some, and he permitted me to ask questions, and I asked anything I wanted. And finally, when we got through talking, he said, well, would you like to be baptized? And I said, yes. We went right to the building right then and was baptized. It was on Sunday afternoon. Do not remember the date. I wish I did.
When you were a child, do you remember what you wanted to do when you grew up? What career you wanted to go into?
Dickie, I really don't remember having any real aspirations. Things were pretty rough, and so often it was a matter of just plain old survival for us from day to day. And I don't remember even having any aspirations as to what I wanted to do. It was a kind of a misguided situation. I realized early on that it would probably be something in selling, that I did like that, and I had seen some of it done, and I had been involved, ran a little paper route, and when I was much younger, and when I was going to school, really, and so I guessed it was going to be something selling. I just didn't have anything like being president or a fireman or a policeman or something like that in mind.
Okay. Well, my daddy over to a little place called Reamer to have some corn ground into the different food things. He'd grind it real fine for a meal, and a little coarser with grits, and then third for just crack it, kind of we called it, for chicken feed. And I had gone with him and was going back toward Valdosta, but it was just out a mile and a half or so. And so he showed me the tower that was over the college there in Valdosta. And he said, now there's where you need to go after you get through the school and get you an education. Well, said then if you don't ever get married, you can look after yourself. And if you do, you'll have something to fall on if you ever become a widow. And so that just kind of stuck way back in the back of my mind. And as being as poor as we were, and having such a hard time just going, walking to regular school and so forth, and spending no money, I didn't know how it would ever take place. But as time went on, with the help of an Uncle and Aunt that lived in town, and a work scholarship, I got to start to college. So I guess I always kind of, after he said that, had teaching in mind as a career.
And you ended up with what degrees?
Master's.
And Pops, your educational background?
Just, well, I dropped out of school in the 11th grade. I got sick with athlete's foot, and we couldn't get a cure for it for a long, long time. And I dropped out of school, and then when I got able to go again, the family situation was such I needed to go to work. So after all so I dropped out completely. Then after all the children were grown and married and gone, actually. Well, I don't know. Yeah, I guess everybody was gone. I went to the what do they call that thing in Jacksonville?
Where you could get an equivalent.
GED.
Anyway, it was a GED. I got a GED after that. So that.
You remember who the President of the United States was when you were born?
No, I do not. Do you?
I knew it was during World War I.
What about when you were married to the President?
Mr. Roosevelt.
What
I do. One thing I do remember, Dickie, is I remember when the presidents died because, and I don't know who it was. I know it must have been prior to Mr. Hoover. I'm wondering if it was Woodrow Wilson. And Daddy was so concerned about it, he kept checking any way we could, then to find out. And I do remember that this president died, and Daddy was upset about it. I do not remember, but I believe it was Woodrow Wilson.
What did your parents do for a living?
Daddy was a farmer.
Daddy did several things. Daddy was a pretty good carpenter. He did some of that. He had a little dairy of his own that I worked in, helped milk the cattle. and Mama both did that while he worked at the Seaboard shops. While he worked at the Atlantic Coastline shops, and then later on, after the Big Depression, when we were trying to get started back again, we lost almost everything. Lost his dairy and just wound up with that little house and an acre of land. Daddy finally got a job with the city, and he worked there a while in the park department, and then later on went back to the shops, to the Seaboard shops, and he worked the rest of his life, retired from there, and got involved in the union and was president of the car knockers union, which was the biggest union there. We were kind of proud that Dad was able to snap back and take charge of his life and do some things that was good for the community.
What about your grandparents? What do you remember about your grandparents?
Granddad Touchton was a farmer in South Georgia, and I don't know exactly where. I'm not sure whether it was Lowndes or Eccles or Berrien County that he was in, but he was a sharecropper who did sharecropping himself. He farmed it on down to others. But later on, after Daddy came to Jacksonville, I don't know where that was, when he was a young man, why then the whole family came down. So Granddaddy Touchton was a farmer, and Granddaddy Ellis was one of the first county commissioners of Duval County when they made that office. He had butcher pen, and he later on went to he had a dairy which grew to be pretty big, and he did that till he wasn't able to work anymore.
Mom?
Besides being a farmer, when the crops were laid back, as they called it, when they were finished for the year, my dad would do carpenter work wherever he could get some to help make money over the winter part of the year. And that's where he met his death. He was in Macon, Georgia, on a project and fell from a scaffold. And it was only, somewhere 7 to 9 feet up, which probably wouldn't have killed him, but he landed on another man's toolbox, and one of those tri-squares was up, and his neck and throat was caught on that. And he bled to death before they could get him to the hospital.
And your grandparents?
My grandparents, I'm
Sorry?
sorry. Granddaddy Dennis, my mother's father, was a section foreman on the railroad, the Southern Railroad. And my other granddaddy was dead before I even came along. And I don't really know what else he did, but he taught some. He was a teacher.
Yeah, this should be easy for you. We'll make a copy of this tape for all the kids. Who's your favorite child?
You won't get an answer.
I could start just name 5 of them, and that'll get
Leave
that
out
job
all
done.
their stuff.
Okay, then what about your grandchildren? Surely you have a favorite grandchild.
Same answer.
Okay, one last chance. Your favorite great-grandchild.
Now, if you'd asked that a little earlier, we could have told you when we only had one.
All right.
Yeah.
What different jobs have you had?
I've had so many till I'm ashamed to say, almost. But
That's
my
interesting.
main job, after I really made an effort to go in this, I worked for Seabold Baking Company for 10 years. And then I meandered around from here to there and back, and in that working for different ones, worked for American Bakeries and for H.J. Heinz Company. And then I worked for Dr. Harold and Alma from 1950 to 1952 in the car place there. Was supposed to be manager, question mark on the end of that. And finally came back to Jackson, went to work for Skinner's Dairy, and stayed there for 35 years. And started loading trucks, and then later was a route supervisor and sales manager, and a little title jumped in there named vice president, which really didn't amount to a whole lot. So finally retired it when I was 65. And I'm 80 now, so I guess that was 15 years ago.
Okay, Mom?
Well, other than the tobacco handling and a few little jobs or maybe a dime or a quarter or something, first thing I did was to work in Crest's store, and I did that one tobacco season for just a few weeks when it was busy time, and they let me go till further notice. And then when it got Christmas season, when the store started hiring again, I had also applied at Grant's store, and they called me first, so I went there. And I mixed that job in with my going to college right on until I got married, or started teaching school. Even after I started teaching school, I filled in some in the summertime at Grant. And so the rest of it is school teaching. I taught mostly second grade all the time. I taught 3 years in fourth grade.
How many years teaching?
28, not counting summer schools.
Do you remember as a child your favorite Christmas gift you got?
Yeah, I do. Back in those days, they let us have little BB guns, and they were named Daisy. And every year I wanted a BB gun, almost without exception. Most of the time got one. I think that was probably my favorite thing, to go out and try to kill some little bird or something that I regretted the time I did it.
Well,
Mom?
I loved all my little dolls, I guess, equally pretty much, because that's when we got our present. And they would put a doll usually in a stocking, and then put some fruit and some nuts that we were not used to, those Brazil nuts, that type of thing. But the one I remember as being such a surprise, because Mama had to save so long to get it, was she got me a desk once.
How old were you?
I was in high school, early high school, that's what I remember. And I really treasured that little desk.
What about your children? Do you remember giving them a Christmas gift that you thought they felt that way? Got something they were surprised about?
We hid their bicycles from the boys one time and had a right amusing time on it, because they had learned that somebody had to do that besides Santa, because it was getting big, and they knew it was that somebody had something for them, and they kind of liked to sneak around and see if they could find something. And but I remember one of them saying, "I know who's our Santa Claus this year, I bet. Ray Braddock." They borrowed him and left him over there. I don't remember whether we had it or not. But they had asked for the bicycles, and they knew that's what they wanted.
The bicycles came in Elma.
Oh, did it?
Yeah.
Well, I thought,
And,
well, we must have gotten some tricycles.
I had them
or
over in,
something, because it was something they
I had
thought
them-
Ray had.
I had them hid over in the garage in the back of some old tires and things. But and they found them. But I remember the girls loved a little doll with a name, some kind of a name to it, that they got several different times, or at least once. You recall, Anita?
I was thinking one named Sweet Sue, but I don't know.
you know, the Barbies and that sort of thing are
But they weren't,
not started
they
yet.
weren't here yet, but they had
Yeah.
a little name, and I think some of you got your doll even after you were married instead of still there.
She
But
got
I-
to it too for a while, didn't she?
We gave Paul a train when he was little. He could have carried a little wind-up train, and he could have cared less about that thing.
Daddy sure did enjoy it though.
Yeah, I did. I loved it. I wish we had saved it.
Be worth some money to
Yeah,
that.
it would.
Where was your best or most memorable vacation?
This is it.
This is it.
This has been great, I tell you.
This has been more of a real vacation, I guess, than we've ever had.
I guess
We've had a lot of nice ones.
we would have never seen this part of the world if it hadn't been for, for you and Onita, having Carmen and her meeting Steve and coming out here. And we saw, spending 3 days in the Rocky Mountains has to be one of the highlights of our lives, has to be.
If you could do anything, what would you do?
If we could do anything over, I don't know, really, Dickie, I guess circumstances would pretty well control that.
I think I would like to have gone more mission things than the two we went to. We started a little late and I felt like we just really shouldn't try anymore.
If you could have Thanksgiving with any 5 people in the world, past or present, who would it be?
That one answers itself.
with the children and their mates. With our children and their mates.
If
All
Ed,
those
McMahon,
precious things.
if Ed McMahon brought you $1 million tomorrow, what would you do with it?
Thing, I guess.
Well,
I don't know. We think along those lines too much.
I think if we had any pet thing we'd like to get involved in, it would be helping with orphan children, trying to make their lives a little bit more stable, and maybe if we had that $1 million to be able to either add on to somebody's or try to help somebody do that, and then hopefully maybe divide what was left with the children and stabilize their lives, because ours is pretty well towards the end of the situation anyway, and just help somebody with it, because that's what it's good for anyway.
What's been the most enjoyable part of your life up to this point?
I don't know, just kind of ins and outs, you know. There's so many nice things. I enjoyed my teaching years until the discipline thing began to be harder and harder and harder. But I really loved teaching.
Was it hard to retire? Did you miss?
Some, but then I subbed for 10 years, and that sort of took
I was real happy in, I guess, the last 10 years of my working life with the Skinner's Dairy was the most enjoyable part of my life. It was, I loved being an elder most of the time. There were times when it was rather frustrating and I had a desire to quit, but very rewarding in a lot of cases too.
What's been the most difficult part of your life so far?
The time when he was fixing to go and see if he had to go to war. And I had the two little boys there and had my doctor there, and Anita was due in 10 or 11 days. And I didn't know what I was going to do. I knew I was welcome to go back to Mama's, but I just didn't know what I was going to do. So he said, well, we decided after he went to Camp Blandon and got his physical, there was some possibility that that bad knee of his would keep him out. And so as it happened, he went down to catch the bus to go down there, and they read everybody else's name off to load the bus, and he was standing there, and they said, asked him who he was, and why, his name hadn't, Ellie asked Ellis about it, and Ellis said, well, they haven't called my name yet, and what I do? He said, well, let's go in the office and see what's what about it. He said, you're not on the list, so he told the bus to go on. And he went in and found out that his boss had gotten a deferment, is that what they called it?
Mm-hmm.
Because he had children. And it was older and had a job in food. That was the main reason.
So how did y'all end up having people stay in your home? Ladies live with you during the war?
We moved over to one side of the house and gave them 1 bedroom, where we took the back 2 bedrooms, and had a stove that you could move anywhere. And so we put it back there and had our little kitchenette there, and our bedroom was next to it. There was a hallway there. We jointly used the bathroom, and had 1 bathroom at the time. And 2 girls who badly needed a place to stay. Their husbands were at Camp Blandon, and we knew the boys could come on weekends, so we fixed it so that a couch we had would do for the other couple when the boys would come home. And they had the kitchen. Well, it so happened that we ate together so much, they said, y'all try to cook on that. And come on and cook on in the kitchen where things were more handy. And we made it through.
How many years did that go on, or how long did that go on?
It was a number of months, wasn't it?
Yeah, it wasn't very long at all.
And Mr. and Ms. Nelson moved in next, didn't
Yeah.
the Nelsons? And they stayed until about the time I found out I was pregnant with Ryan. So that was several months.
And this was at Fleet Street?
Yeah.
That was at the Fleet Street.
They helped us too because
Yes.
of the payments on the house, and it was a help to us.
Payments on the house were about 1/3 of his salary. And you're not supposed to be more than about 1/4 of your salary in a place to live. So we had been told.
What
So it
was that you thought was the most difficult part of it?
Could, if I were to say something now that we deemed not wise, could it be deleted? I think this thing we're going through right now with Paul's divorce, that's been one of the most difficult for me. And I'm sure it has for her as well.
When do you remember being the most scared? Was it what you were saying a while ago? Possibly the most scared you've ever been?
I know one time when you were up here,
When did that show?
when you were at a fence post trying to go get somebody to help you when you couldn't breathe, when you were going to
Asthma.
Jenny
When you
Rose,
had that
when
asthma
you had
attack.
an asthma
Yeah.
attack,
Trying to go
that
over
was
to
real
Jenny's.
bad.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'd forgotten that. I just, it was asthma. I hadn't had asthma always, and so didn't know how to deal with it. And I was going to Dr. Harold's that morning, and we were gonna talk about going in the hospital. And when it came time to go, I guess I just let things cave me in almost, and I couldn't hardly breathe. And I thought, well, I'll run over to Jenny Rose, who lived right at our back door, and get her to get some help. And walking over, there had been a gate there on one occasion, just 2 posts there. Then the gate was gone, and I reached up and put my hands on top of those posts, and I got relief. I could breathe, you know, and they say that helped. And I guess I was about as scared then as I'd ever been. Later on that day, I parked the car on the street close to the old St. James building and started walking up. I had another attack, and I leaned up against the building and got relief there. I guess I was pretty scared then, I don't know. Because when you can't breathe, it's real frightening to you.
Did somebody try to rob you with a gun in the parking lot or something?
Yes, I guess
That was scary too.
yeah, I guess I'd forgotten that. I'd been to see Nathalie. She'd had cancer and would later die. And told them all goodbye. And when I walked to the car, I saw a black car pull out just beyond me. Never thought anything about it. And I had the key in the car door to unlock it. And I heard a holler across the street. And I looked, and here came a black man, a tall black boy. It looked like he was, you know, still a boy, but very tall. And he looked tall to me, and I saw something shiny in his hand. Well, I unlocked the car, though, and got in just as fast as I could, and locked the car back. And he came. He didn't ever say a word to me, but he hit that door like he was going to want to go through the car. Then he walked up in front of the car, right in front of the hood, and pointed the gun at me. And by that time, I was lying over in the seat and trying to get the key in the ignition, and all this was just happening in seconds, of course. And he stood there for just seconds, I guess. And then he turned and walked away about 10 feet, turned, pointed the gun again, but never did shoot it. And finally just walked on down the street. Last time I saw him, he was walking down the street with that thing hanging down at his side like this. It had an old long barrel. It, you know, it may not even been a real gun, I don't know, but it looked very real to me. Yeah, that was probably the scariest I ever was. I had forgotten that.
What about the happiest? Remember being the happiest? Some event or time?
I think for me, it would have been at each birth when everything was all right, when you know, we'd go through the whole thing together, and then finally I'd carry Catherine to the hospital, and then from there on out, my hope and prayer was that Catherine and the baby would be fine, and prayed for that. And of course, you know, the proof is all around us today. And they were, I guess, though, seeing those 5 little ones come to live with us, although we had our problems and times when things weren't good, but it never was because of the fact that we had them. It was because we couldn't maybe do all the things we'd like to do for them and with them and so on. But when they came to be part of us, I guess I could safely say that was the happiest time of my life. Of course, I was pretty happy the day I got her.
Yeah. Mom?
Well, when we get together for our family reunions, I'm just about as happy as I can ever hope to be. And especially, I remember especially down at camp one time when we had everybody to say something around and about. And one member of our family had not been as close to us as the rest, broke down and cried and said she had not been what she should have been. And it just seemed like a whole new start right then, and that was one of the happiest times I ever had. And another was when we sang this last time we got together for his birthday, and probably we sang that for our prayer. But all those times when we get together are so filled with genuine happiness and love. I enjoy them so much.
Can you remember one of the funniest things about each of your kids? Something funny that they did, or you laughed about it, maybe after it was over, or
The boys did when they were with you, and I'll see if I can churn back into some of
I know Anita talks about singing and whistling at the table
the things.
on occasion.
Yeah. I told them that when my mother was coming along, her mother had, her family had always made them be quiet and not sing or not do anything. She said, if I ever get married and have any children, they can sing at the table if they want to. So she told that, and then I passed it on down to my children, and so they think that was real funny. They're going to let us sing, and they could sing if they wanted to. So I don't remember whether Daddy kind of told them not too much of that or not, but it seemed like they didn't keep it up too long.
I think he liked it.
So, but anyway,
I'm sure there was times when each one of them had their day in the sun as far as saying or doing things, and but I don't remember anything really in particular.
I'm sure some things will come to us later, but they did cute things. Some of the little costumes that made themselves and things like that would just amuse me. For Halloween, they fix their own something, to have fun.
What has been the most difficult part of being a parent?
Hurting with them, I need anyone I was hurting. You mentioned holidays the worst.
The children never were much trouble. The boys were active in sports and never got into trouble, and the girls were always in the right place at the right time. And other than this being children and making those mistakes that children make, and not being happy sometimes with our decision was a little difficult. But actually, there's never been many difficult times in it for me. I think maybe when they first started dating, I would worry especially about my girls. I'm worried about the boys too. As a matter of fact, I didn't sleep till they come home, but you know, really, we never had many problems. We were blessed.
What was enjoyable about being a parent?
Well, anytime they had success and came home telling us this or this or this happened, we were happy for them. They all were, when they were born, they were all normal looking and acting and so forth. We were so thankful for that and happy. And people would compliment them, and we enjoyed that. Their looks as well as their behavior, especially. People would brag about our children. And Ellis's daddy said one time, son, of all
Uh,
Those are the things that we really.
in their adult life, Dickie, wherever they've worshiped, we've heard things about our boys that were complimentary, especially at North Atlanta. They called them the Touchton boys there. But in all the other congregations, and I remember very well an incident that happened at in University Church when somebody paid us a compliment about Onita. I remember the same thing happening with Iris in Virginia, and I remember the same thing happening with Mary. Their comments were, your girl is very special.